Namaskar, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi Achint. On popular demand, let me just say this. I have with me Rami ji once again. Namaskar, welcome to the show.
Namaskar, Adi, how are you?
I am very good. I hope you're as well. We are going to talk a little bit about the Northeast, right? I hope so. Mathew Van Dyke se lekar, something is happening in Myanmar. There's Manipur. There is, some action in Arunachal and, of course, Assam with the Bangladeshis. There's a lot to discuss in this region. But I want to open with Manipur and the Mathew Van Dyke issue. Do you think this whole flare up in Manipur is anywhere connected to the fact that we picked him up?
See, I may have a different point of view, which is contrary to, popular belief. And that's just because maybe I'm looking at things slightly differently. I think there's been a lot of mercenary interference. We know that, We've seen that during the height of Manipur conflict as well. We saw people being caught not just in Imphal, but also in Calcutta and other places en route. Um, we know the situation in Myanmar. I think we must remember, and I don't know, I'm trying to find the words to say this, but we must remember that a lot of mercenaries are simply mercenaries. They're everywhere, and it's almost become a bigger business since the Russia-Ukraine war. The kind of employment that it has given a lot of people and the kind of uh, adventurous sentiments it's fulfilled for some. Like even Mathew Van Dyke, and I'm sure you've done your a background search on him, and you know that how interested he was in joining, the agencies, and how interested he was in wanting to be on the field, and therefore he comes with this sort of call it spirit or call it an inkling for an adrenaline rush. We know that he was in Libya, we know he was in jail, we know he was in Ukraine. In this case, I think the way we have to look at it is that they were mercenaries. They were there specifically across Mizoram in the Chin state, training these people on drone warfare, which I have said before, that this sort of warfare is very big business in Myanmar. Remember, we've even spoken about specific teams that a lot of these EOs have in just drone training. We know that they use sophisticated drones. Earlier on, when we started talking, Addie, if you remember, we used to talk about how they were making drones from assembled parts. And slowly, right at the outset, 3, 4 years ago, we were talking about how EOs used to get assembled parts and make drones. And then that conversation shifted to how they're just now buying it outright and they have the mechanism to really engineer it themselves. So they've also come a long way. An interesting thing happened today, and I've always thought that the usage of drones in Myanmar is a lot and nobody's really counting it. I was on a panel discussion today with Professor Gunaratne, who's a very well renowned author and analyst. And he made a statement. He said, according to his team, more drone attacks have happened in Myanmar than they've happened in Ukraine. It's just that nobody's paying attention. And the best trainers in the world come from the guys who have operational experience in Ukraine. So therefore, it isn't a surprise to see these guys in Myanmar. And to tell you the truth, it wasn't a surprise for me either. And in this situation, yes, I think there is a lot more to the story. I don't think what goes against them, at least in India, is just them not having an ILP or crossing over illegally. I think the tracking must have been going on for a while for them to have picked up with such coordination. These things don't happen overnight. You know what I'm talking about. So I think there's a lot more to the story, but I do think that these guys were there specifically to train the EOs across the border. And, and then the story continues. What's happened in Manipur is something that is, and many things have happened in Manipur, is something that is a question of keeping the fire burning. We again, if you recall, in many of our conversations, you and me have agreed upon the fact that there are vested interests that are not going to allow this to die down. And these sort of horrific instances are going to ever so often crop up when negotiations aren't going their way. And I think I would limit it to that.
Hmm. The interesting thing about Manipur to me was people started going back, things started settling down, children started going to school, normalcy life, and there was a flare up. And post that, if you look at it, with that kind of a flare up, there was protests, this, that, and it just calmed down after that immediately. So it's very. I don't want to say that because I'll probably get a lot of flack for it. But is it manufactured or not? I don't know.
Adi, there are vested interests in every group.
Yeah.
There isn't a community there that can say that, look, we have no vested interest. Unfortunately,
Mm.
every 3 months there have been instances of,
Yeah. It's just like a
communal,
reminder for Manipur.
yeah, yeah, communal clashes. कभी इस ग्रुप का इस ग्रुप के साथ होता है, इस कम्युनिटी का इस कम्युनिटी के साथ होता है, and they've made the situation so hypersensitive that even people like you and me who are free talkers and really are dependent on our analysis don't really want to name communities any longer, because it's just, it's become so prolonged and it's become so hypersensitive that, and that's a really good strategy, because then nobody is naming anybody, nobody is
And,
saying anything.
and this stuff actually affects whatever settlement is
Yeah,
happening.
correct. So the strategy is good, that just, anybody talks about it, you rage after them to such an extent that, they stop calling, I wouldn't say stop calling a spade, but at least, have to carefully watch their words. It's the same situation that happened with a lot of people on social media who couldn't talk about religious radicalization,
Hmm.
especially with a particular religion, because they'd be shadow banned, they'd be banned, so on and so forth. But coming back to Manipur, I think the thing is that, yes, there's always an emotion and there's always this ability to be able to organize yourself and protest. And of course, the protest is always aimed towards the government. And whether a common person, whatever they feel about the government, but, I want to bring the point back to the fact that there's always been a change of goalpost.
Hmm.
जब गवर्नमेंट नहीं थी, कहते थे कि ओ पॉपुलर गवर्नमेंट आनी चाहिए. When is the popular government going to come? When is the popular government going to come? When the popular government came, when is the president's rule going to be revoked? When is that going to happen? When that happened, oh, we don't like this government, they're not doing enough. There is no winning like this, and there is no way out. Today's date, people are talking about buffer zones like it's something that is permanent. How can within a state people be so callously talking about buffer zones like that? Who's decided that these buffer zones should stay? Why are we incapable of removing these buffer zones? Because there are these vested interests that will do something that will make the environment unsafe. And then the blame, it's like a vicious circle. Then the blame will come back on the security forces. It will come back on the government. So I'm just saying that, there are many people who want peace. And most of the people who want peace are good, hardworking, educated people whose businesses have suffered, whose parents' businesses have suffered, who've had a loss of home, who've had a loss of income, who have not been able to go back to their villages because of this conflict. The people who are continuing this are the people who are benefiting, who are making money, and who are hoping that with some kind of settlement with the government, they will either be given a position of power, they will become leaders in their community, or they will keep making the kind of money that they've been making through this conflict. And that is the sole reason, because no rational person of any community which is perpetrating the crime will any longer support that sort of violence, because it's just been too long. So I don't think it is because of this, it is because of that. I think the problem is internal now.
Mhm. And it's also probably set into the system because of the time that it has been alive. It's like a living being, and the more it stays alive like this, the more the impression is a little more deeper, and scars are more deeper and stuff. So I guess that's a
Scars are deeper. The people who are playing truant in this are thinking that this is the pressure point,
yeah.
right? So, ठीक है, मतलब, I mean, it's going to be tough, but these are exactly the people who should be blamed for it. And
Yeah.
everybody knows it across the communities who these
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
So I think, initially conflict also has its contours. It
Mm.
also has its flow. And with that, it changes shape. Initially, there were particular reasons why the conflict started. It reached a peak. It subsided. Now, compared to the peak, now the rate of incidents are much less. It happens very strategically, very unfortunately so. We saw two kids recently die of, a rocket out of nowhere. And this is why, this has become very important, this sort of aerospace sort of dynamics in these conflicts, whether it's drones, whether it's these rocket launchers that they're using, rockets that they're using. Um, these kids, what, 5, 6 months old, 5 years old, probably have no idea what this conflict is about. So sure, scars are going to be tough, to this, to forget. Situations are going to be difficult. But I think the contour of the conflict has changed, and now these spurts are more internal, it's less external.
Mm. Let me ask you this. The situation became quite tensed up after Bangladesh, Yunus, and that entire drama happened there. Everybody was worried. They were American special forces in Myanmar. We know all that nonsense that they were trying to do there. Some of them got nicked also. Anyways, that whole thing was there. What is it that they're looking for in Myanmar? I mean, is it the rare earth that you challenge the rare earth? We know Blackwater is already there, guarding, by the way, Chinese assets in Myanmar. They are planning to switch sides because of some reason. The Blackwater has a subsidiary company in Hong Kong, which is registered with the Chinese doing that. They are trying to create a mediocre, or I don't know what they're trying to do in that entire area. What's your perspective? What's happening there? Why is there so much interest? And this whole rise of President Lang, if I may, and the removal of sanctions from the Americans, weird signals happened after Trump came into power in Myanmar, especially. What's the main game?
Look, I think Myanmar is a state in conflict. It will continue. Elections happen. I was an official independent observer for the Myanmar elections for the third phase.
Mm.
And you cannot doubt the processes of the elections. which has seen USDP come into power, which is the military-backed political party. But the processes have been great. The EVMs were great. I got to see it firsthand in 6 constituencies. I got to see the functioning of the EVMs. I saw participation. I, we were briefed about the rules and the regulations, so on and so forth. You can't disregard the elections. However, that's not going to stop the conflict. The conflict is going to continue. Now, out of I might be one or two constituencies off on my numbers, but out of about 62, 64 constituencies that didn't go into elections, out of 330, almost 60, 70% of those are across India's borders. What does that tell you? The only reason that they haven't gone into elections in those townships is because of the conflict, because of the control of the EOs. Therefore, it tells you that the control of the EOs and the conflict is the highest across India's borders. Now, that is what makes it very interesting for us. Whatever any country does in any other country makes no difference to us. But if it's across our borders, then it has an immediate repercussion. It has on security, it has on our territorial integrity, it has on immigration, it has on transnational sort of conflicts and ethnic ties, and of course, politics and environment as well. Now, yes, I think we had spoken about this also previously, that it was immediately after President Trump came into power that he lifted the sanctions of a couple of junta leaders, and he also withdrew the money that was going to NUG, that was the National Unity Government. He also revoked the temporary the TPP program, which was the temporary what was it? Basic a TTP program, the temporary transit program. I think that's what it was called, where refugees from Myanmar could go to the US on a temporary basis. So he revoked that as well, and that obviously caused ripples and so on and so forth. However, what was even more interesting after that was the US-China tariff war. In the US-China tariff war, there were sanctions that were slammed on China. When those sanctions were slammed on China, China immediately, the first reaction was that we will withdraw our exports of critical earth minerals. And they cited it being done in national interest. The minute that was done, obviously within 2 months, tariffs were renegotiated, meeting in Busan happened, tariffs lifted. Right after that was the AI summit in India, where Pax Silica was also signed by India.
Yeah.
And it's not an agreement, but it's an alliance of countries across that are coming together to basically say that we're going to de-risk our supply chains of critical earth minerals. So obviously, and there's no debate on this. There's no negation on this. That big powers realize that that's a vulnerable point. That critical earth minerals is where our pressure point is, and we're way behind China. And therefore, we need to have our own supply chains. We need to have our own infrastructure. We need to have our own interests safeguarded so that one is not under this sort of pressure again. Around that same time, the other thing that happened was that there were reports that came out of DC that they were seeing some proposals from Myanmar for critical earth mining. This was also around the same time, if you remember, the photographs of Asim Munir going with his buddy Shabazz and a box of colorful stones, which they were trying to sell the Americans as critical earth minerals. In my opinion, they should get it tested. As far as I'm concerned, they're just like some colored stones they've carried along, the two of them. So like bright red, bright green. Anyhow, so there was this sort of interest there also, because obviously in a place like Pakistan, if these guys decide that they want to give access to mining for critical earth minerals, who's going to stop them? See, in a country like India, which is a highly robust democracy, where the media platforms are superbly, strong, it's not that easy to just decide to start mining somewhere or give these huge contracts. You will have environmental groups, you'll have the media all over you. You will have to give accountability on the cost
Yeah.
of that sort of exploration. In a country like Pakistan, it's not going to happen. In a country like Myanmar, where there is conflict, also it's not going to happen. Where does China get its critical earth minerals from?
Just
It gets
yank it.
it from the ethnic armed organization controlled areas in Myanmar.
Mm.
So they are fairly like controlled just by, let's say, the Kachins, the KIA, the ethnic armed organizations. And looking at the success of the KIA, there are many other organizations now that are really interested in subletting their land to countries that are to companies that are willing to come and explore. For because exploration is the first step, right? After that, one figures out how you're going to take it out. First you need to test the soil and figure out what are the minerals that it even has. So the world is way behind China right now. Anything that happens, Ari, is going to take time. Anybody interested in it, maybe anybody. It could be, it could be any of the Western countries, it could be Eastern countries, it could be India for that matter. Uh, we're behind China. For us, it's going to take us time. For anybody, it's going to take time. But it's
Mm.
also not going to be easy, because a country like India has borders with Myanmar, but any sort of other country, how do they access it and bring it down? Unless they manage to cut deals with EOs who control
Five
these
to
areas.
yeah,
And
five
then
to
and then you bring it down to Bay of Bengal, and then from there you ship it. But to bring it anywhere through these channels, the amount of points of negotiations you'll have to do, an amount of groups that you will have to navigate through is not that easy.
Mm.
So I'm just saying that sure, there's this interest, sure, this is a very, very active debate. This is a very important debate, which now is the time to start having, because in another 5 years' time, we're going to see it explode. Um, but is it going to be easy? It's not going to be easy.
Not going to be easy. So that's what I was a bit concerned at the time when Yunus came into power, and this there was some action which was happening there. A lot of fighting started in that region, and weapons started coming in and stuff, and it was okay. But thankfully, that one thing is now gone, so things have calmed down. About just another question about Myanmar, President Lang, if I may, President General Hang. I don't know how to address the guy anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, Now
President,
the reports now around, and I think you've also written about it, is that the trust level that he has with India is a little higher than what he has with China. Why is that opinion prevalent, and what advantage can we take out of this, especially for, I'm not talking about minerals and stuff. Rare earth, we've got enough of our own, but I'm more worried about the fact that safety and security of that region, is there some contribution that we can get in realistic terms?
look, it depends entirely on us. How are we willing to play this game? How are we willing to negotiate? Who are the people who are negotiating? Who are the people who are building contacts? Who
Mm.
are the people who have enough knowledge? And I'm not saying that there aren't people, but it's critical that we place the right people there who understand the sentiments of all stakeholders. There isn't one stakeholder in this situation
Yeah.
in Myanmar.
Every
There are
five
many.
miles, there's Yes.
And there can't be one strategy, one shoe fits all sort of strategy. It has to be tailor made. If it's going to be tailor made, then you need to balance and check everybody's aspirations. And anybody who knows what I've said before and who knows Myanmar knows what I'm talking about. There isn't one KIA, there isn't one Chin group, there isn't, there isn't like one person, so there are many, many different, depending on the region, depending on the fragmentation of the groups, one's approach will have to be different. Now, General Ling, of course, has had a tumultuous relationship with China before the coup, even. And both the leaders of both the countries have not been each other's favorites.
Yeah.
But as you know, once the coup happened, the dependency on China increased a little bit because of the EOs that they have influence on, whether it's MNDA, whether it's TNLA. There's just a certain amount of influence that China has on these EOs. And China's special envoy has an ability to be able to negotiate with them and cut deals with the Tatmadaw in how they deem it to be necessary. So therefore, China has this sort of importance in Myanmar. China also, and I've traveled the length and breadth in Myanmar, and China also, has created this dependency because you see the cars in Myanmar, you see the local goods in Myanmar. They're all being replaced by Chinese things. You see the newspapers, no matter where I went, from the airport to hotels to offices, China Daily was always there. And apparently, in a lot of places, they just come and leave them there every morning for free. So, a lot of the big businesses are owned by the Chinese. There's a lot of intermarriage amongst, the Chinese and the local population. Cities like Mandalay, Pierlin, which used to be predominantly Indian, are now becoming largely Chinese. Obviously, that then therefore will have an influence. However, the average person in Myanmar still prefers to deal with Indians. Indians are considered less transactional. Indians are considered more trustworthy. Indians are considered less abrasive. And Indians are considered as, at least the diaspora, is considered as people who can assimilate, into the culture in Myanmar. Every temple that you go there will also worship the Buddha. You'll always see the Buddha there. You will see that they all speak the language. You will see that they dress the same way. Indians are very, very good at making their host population comfortable. They also more often than not follow the straight and narrow. They're not in any underground businesses and things like that. So they are good people to have around, and that gives us a lot of benefit on ground. However, with the More Tamu road being closed, with those channels, earlier on there used to be buses, you could travel by car straight up to Mandalay and all. Now that becoming difficult, it's cut us off. It's cut us off from the Myanmar that used to be really accessible to us. And that has obviously, that has cost us certain amount of influence on ground. Number two, I just think for a very long time we haven't taken Myanmar that seriously. Not many people have spoken about it, talked about it, understood it. And I don't say this, that's technically not your responsibility or mine. I say this in our previous governments. There was no interest, forget Myanmar, there was no interest in the Northeast, and for obvious reasons, the reasons why. So as a result, there was never any encouragement in this people-to-people connect that we had. There was no encouragement in increase of trade. There was no encouragement of Indian goods flooding the market. And, it's not just about Indian goods flooding the market, it's also about encouraging goods from Myanmar into India so that we become an important partner for them. There was none of that. So I think that has been a bit of a shame. And to expect us to cover all of that now, immediately, is going to be tough. With the conflict, it's going to be tougher. But my answer to your question to conclude will be that China does have a foothold. And
Yeah, of course,
India
it does. Yeah.
and India does have goodwill.
Mm.
Um, so it depends entirely on us how we make the most of our goodwill.
That would be, yeah,
It's general laying today. There'll be other people that we will have to reach out to. There'll be other people in the government. There'll be other, even EOs, that we
yeah, yeah,
want to or need to. Do we have those connections? Do we have the right people? I've known some really, really good people, and I can't name them, but, who were top of the line in the agencies, who looked at Myanmar the way it should have been looked at, security guys, diplomats who really understood Myanmar. Have we created another line of those?
mm,
Is a question we must ask ourselves. And the answer is just really simple, Larry. It depends on how we really make the most of the goodwill. Because foothold to nahi hai.
mm. ये foothold तो है ही नहीं, because we never did anything for such a long time. अभी जाके आपको 2-3 साल में during a coup तो foothold मिलने नहीं वाला. It's going to take some time. There's no question. The point is,
Conversations have to start. We
yeah,
have to stop playing on the back foot. We have to play on the front foot. Um, we have to find individuals, special envoys, who can really exert that sort of influence with confidence, and send
yeah,
them in. Our embassy, I have to say, in Myanmar has done a brilliant job. It was a tight walk because they were
mm,
there during the elections and during all the pressure that was coming from across the world. So they've done a brilliant job. But, we need many, many, many hands like
more,
that.
yeah, many, many, many more brilliant things.
We also need, by the time those suggestions come back to the center, we also need quick decisions.
Mm,
One of the benefits that China has is China's decision making is almost like immediate,
mm,
in certain aspects. So, yeah, so I think, it's a funny thing, I have to tell you, that right at the outset of these conversations on the coup, and this is a shift that I've seen. We used to talk about how important Myanmar is because our Act East policy will be from there. We'll be able to reach Southeast Asia, and therefore it makes it so important. Indians are so good at adapting the dialogue in people who are talking about South Asia, Southeast Asia, or our neighborhood have now started saying, sea route bhi to hai. So we are so quick to adapt that sometimes it's detrimental for us.
yeah, you don't stick to it. And
Of
there's
course,
also
सीरू तो पहले भी था
there's
मगर
also
फिर
that thing, you don't want to get stuck.
हाँ
You don't want to get stuck. That's also a thing.
sure you don't want to get stuck, and I'm just saying that we still saw Myanmar and our road connectivity and our land route as extremely important, even though we had the sea route before. Now you can't sort of like lean on the fact that, oh, the sea routes are there to access these countries. Let's shift the conversation there. It was there when we envisioned the Act East policy as well, but
Yeah.
we envisioned the land route for a particular reason. That land routes, traverse through populations, they traverse through
Business
countries, and
opportunities, whole lot of things. Yeah.
yeah, so you can't. I'm just saying, let's not be so quick to adapt and forget about Myanmar and say, okay, we can take it through the sea route.
No, no. There's Myanmar is very critical, and as a matter of fact, the incidents that keep happening across Myanmar, NSEM, KYM, Ulfa I, these groups are still pretty active. I don't see any other groups which are, apart from the chins and the cookies and all that, which are there. But the organized groups which are there, these are the two ones which I thought Ulfa was starting to make a headway, but I don't think they have that much capability apart from doing some hit and run sort of nonsense. What do you think is happening there as far as the fencing is concerned? Because the recent attacks are all because of that. They are not able
See,
to come inside here
yes,
and do
they
stuff.
don't, but Adi, they don't, why and all, none of these guys believe in fencing.
Yeah,
Correct? The whole pitch is that these are false borders.
borders. Yeah,
Their idea of Nagalim traverses through these borders.
true.
So for them, India is imposing a border. Who cares what they think, frankly?
Yep.
I mean, you can continue dreaming on, but these borders are there, and these borders have held us in good stead without severing our relationships, our transnational ethnic relationships. Our
Mm.
relationships have thrived. Just because a border is there, relationships haven't thrived. Of course, they've thrived, and ever so often people manipulate these transnational ethnic relationships as well. But that aside, they are going to continuously want to do something because that's going to keep them in the spotlight. That's going to re engage people in this conversation that these borders, oh, there's a group that believes that these borders are forced. Whenever you say things like, oh, a nation is forcing something on us, you immediately become a victim. You are the grieved party.
Can I,
And that's
if you don't mind,
the
I
please.
want you also throw a little light the Nagalim kind of the lobbying which used to happen from 2002 to 2011. That lady Joyce, what's her name? She's now again registered as a FARA. Her number is 54546 or something like that. As again a representative of Nagalim. So what's kind of happening here
Look,
in this conversation as well?
so look, if you look at the geography of Nagalim uh, goes through some very important states: Arunachal, Upper Assam, parts of Assam, Arunachal, Nagaland, parts of Manipur, and of course areas across the border. These areas have all been strategically important in the minds of many, many people. I've mentioned to you before the idea of the Crown Colony, which had to be dumped because the British luckily ran out of money. But,
Hmm.
the Gupta plan really was interested in keeping these areas as a Crown Colony while they withdrew from the rest of the country.
Yeah.
Anyway, the plan flopped, but the sentiment continued, and this prolonged emotional idea that we are different. And what does Nagalim say? Nagalim says Nagalim for Christ. It doesn't say it's for everybody. That's what their slogan is. In those days, of course, there used to be a parallel government. They had popular support. And, you can't blame anybody for it. Ali. They had popular support um,
We didn't go there.
because the government of India mucked up, Jawaharlal Nehru couldn't care less. There was this very famous story that he went for a rally and he arrived late and people just got bored and turned away and he never ever visited
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Um, so, there was complete apathy. Having said that, that prolonged sentiment, of course, went on for a while where there was illegal tax collection, there used to be a parallel government, and so on and so forth. Over a period of time, people started getting tired as well. Apart from the fact that there was a change in dispensation, that immediately the first agreement that this present government signed with uh, was with NSCN IM in 2016, and it was considered a major breakthrough. So it at least indicated the fact that you were even looking towards here, to be able to, uh, or at least to want to sign agreement. But having said that, I think really what's happened is that because the whole movement has been termed as, and it doesn't stand so any longer. They've lost all popular support. People have moved on. Young people have nothing to do with this insurgency, and they're like, look, we're having a good time. We're seeing our state revive economically. We're seeing it attract business. We're seeing, we're being able to move around like within their own state, and they couldn't do that before. So
Yeah.
we are seeing peace come back, and peace has come back. So nobody now is interested. But what's happened is that this prolonged sentiment that, oh my God, we are this, you know, we have been wrong because there's an imposition of this, nation on our individuality. And they are trying to absorb us. We have nothing to do with them. Our culture is different, so on and so forth. Immediately um, brings together a bunch of people who want to be saviors from across the world. Now, whether they're individuals, whether they are state sponsored, whether they are international organizations, they were even registered with the Unrepresented People's Organization at one point as well. So, they all come together to support them, to encourage them, and through NGOs, through uh, Hawala networks, finance them. This has been done before, and this will continue to happen. Luckily, the public support has waned.
Yeah.
And that I have seen with my own eyes, because when I used to travel there, I remember seeing the kind of military presence on the roads. And I used to think, oh my God, this doesn't look like the rest of the country, because, coming from Delhi, you just never seen that kind of military presence. You'd see that there. You'd see curfews. You'd see having within, even in a place like Dimapur, which is a big city, bustling city, beautiful, city with some archaeological spots as well. Very interesting. But you had to move in convoys from the hotel to where the function was happening, with security at both ends. And the distance would have been just about maybe 2 kilometers. That was ridiculous. You'd see the fanciest cars, the fanciest homes, but zero infrastructure. And you'd wonder that there's no economy. Where is this money coming from to have such fancy cars and fancy houses? And then you'd realize that these were all members of these groups. The common man suffered. Every child was studying abroad or studying outside the state because it was not safe enough for them to be there. The same was the case in Manipur. And, Nagaland, as much as it has completely, sort of shunned this sort of separatist ideology, Manipur, I fear for, because it's already been a couple of years since we've seen the conflict. The conflict keeps rising up.
Mm.
Kids who were 10 are going to be 15. Kids who were 15 are going to be 20.
Yeah, this 5 years generation is gone. Yeah.
Correct, and if it doesn't stop, it's going to be like, a whole generation that's only going to see this conflict, is going to see curfews, economy is going to suffer, and recruitment is going to increase.
Mm.
And that's going to be problematic. I mean, look, mercenaries are paid almost like $4,000 to $6,000 a month. So pay scales are also going up.
It's quite ridiculous. This the ignorance that we've actually given to these areas, and I would say the neighboring countries in that side, country, especially Myanmar, it astonishes me. I mean, it really astonishes me. And the more I learn about that place, the more I wonder that we
But
couldn't actually.
But I'll tell you something right at the outset of all of this also, there, we have this ability to sympathize always with the wrong blocs.
Yeah. Tell
We
me
are
about
highly sympathetic people.
it. Mm.
So as a result, by the time you get the roadmap right, you've lost a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. Any
So,
victim card kind of gains something.
so I'm just saying, it's not an easy situation, Ari. I think while, in certain aspects it's tough, it's not as easy to cause trouble in these areas. In certain aspects, it's very easy to cause trouble in these areas. Myanmar stabilizing is long, long away. I think we must also watch the Bay of Bengal very closely. We must watch Bangladesh very closely. We must watch our elections in the Northeast very closely. Um, we must watch newer party umbrella groups trying to test waters. Uh, I'm just hinting at one of the groups that came together and did a big show of strength in the Northeast, in Tripura. We must also watch them because they're testing waters right now. What could it mean if there was a larger umbrella entity? So these are things that we need to look for. And I just like to say that I think when it comes to situations in states like Manipur, I think Manipur has to find its answer. The people of Manipur has to have to find the answer now. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I was mute. There's no solution right now. What's happening there is not going to get, the people have to kind of stand up and do stuff.
Look,
Of
Russia
course,
and
they've
Ukraine,
suffered.
Russia and
Yeah,
Ukraine, so conflicts have an ability to continue even if they just keep simmering.
yeah, that's true. Ramiji, I must say this was enlightening and very, very, very good conversation. I'm really happy that we were able to do this because I find people don't want to talk about it because and it's an extremist opinion when you ask 90%, oh gee, Manipur to gaya, oh gee, cookie land ban gaya. नहीं है, ऐसा नहीं होता. There's a lot many more intricacies. कहीं नहीं जा रहा. And if it's not gone till 2010 when it was at the
कहाँ
height, अभी नहीं
कहाँ
जाएगा वो.
जाएगा
It'll be
क्यों
fine.
जाएगा everybody is so integrally a part of India, whether it's the Nagas, the Cookies, the
नहीं,
Metis,
कहीं नहीं जाएगा.
whoever. And plus किधर जाएगा?
नहीं नहीं यार 2010 तक नहीं गया जब तक the situation was terrible actually at that time. अब तो development is happening, efforts are reaching inside, railways are there, airports are there, schools, colleges, all sorts of stuff is coming across. And I can see that the new generation, I mean, I watch a lot of reels of the generation there. They're into biking, they're into dancing, they're into all singing. Dhurandhar is very popular there in that area. So they're getting, more and more, I would say, aspirational, which is great, and I think I welcome that. And they
Yeah,
must. There's no
the
question about it.
aspiration is a really good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I look at, and there are issues. There's no question about it, but I hope they get sorted out. Thank you so much once again, and my request to the audience is please like, subscribe, and share this. And of course, if you can support the channel, check out the description, join our groups, check out our store, and we shall see you again for another discussion. Tab tak, namaskar.
Thank you.